Welcome. Still reading away. And well into the second portion of the report now, which is the obstruction portion of the report. So I have gone through the entire roughly 200 specs. It's easier to read, not a whole lot of redactions, but also I thought some real revelatory stuff in there about the investigative techniques that were employed or deployed against the president and his people. I think people are jumping to the obstruction part of the report a little too quickly. So, oh, that's a shame. Big millipede box. Yeah, well, if there's one thing that this Mueller report does, it absolutely puts a nail in the coffin of any Jeff Sessions theater, white hat nonsense. I think Bill Mitchell's out of his mind. Some people sharing his tweets with me. It's just insanity. There is nothing in here that is good or redeeming about Jeff Sessions. And now we know what we had an instinct about, or at least we had some type of awareness that something was going on with Jeff Sessions beyond the narrative that he spoke to ethics attorneys at the DOJ and decided to recuse himself. What we learned definitively in this report that Jeff Sessions was already under investigation by the FBI before he recused himself from the Russia investigation. So let me repeat that again. The FBI had already opened through Andrew McCabe an investigation into whether or not Jeff Sessions had lied to Congress during his confirmation hearings regarding some discussions that he may have had with Ambassador Kislyak or not. So if there's any mystery to why Sessions was under his desk talking with Chuck Cooper, his lawyer, on the telephone immediately in February of 2017, upon getting confirmed, it was weeks, less than weeks, he was actually being investigated by the FBI prior, at least a month prior to the Russia investigation being opened up by Rosenstein by virtue of the order assigning it to Mueller as a special counsel. It's shocking, but not incredibly surprising if you step back long enough to see, the trees for the forest. But Jeff Sessions, let me repeat that. Jeff Sessions was under an FBI investigation for lying to Congress, opened up by Andrew McCabe prior to recusing himself from the Russia investigation, which now that should make sense for all of you now who wondered, was Jeff Sessions compromised in some way? The answer is yes, he was compromised by the Department of Justice and the FBI. His own department had an attorney general who was being actively investigated by the FBI. His inferiors, it is mind-blowing. It also carefully describes the back and forth between Jeff Sessions and the president, as witnessed by Don McGahn and others. The fact that when the recusal was official, the president went nuts. When the special counsel was announced, he went really nuts and rightly predicted that this could potentially drag out through his entire administration and ruin his presidency. Certainly, any idiot out there telling you that Mueller had performed some type of benefit to the process here is somebody worthy of unfollowing. I mean, just get yourself away. Get yourself away from any hopium addict out there on Twitter. Just get yourself away from it, because there are real issues buried into this report, as we predicted there would be. And I think we need to get down to the business of what we're going to do about just some damage control, but not a lot. I mean, a lot of this stuff's embarrassing. A lot of this stuff is unnecessary to put out there. Nobody should ever go through a process like this where they're being held to a public spectacle of justice, a different standard of justice. It's embarrassing because now all these people that gave these gave their testimony for fear of being indicted if they didn't, or if they were to be non-forthcoming in a way not to etch to non-embarrass the president, they would get, charged with a 1001. So clearly, Andrew Weissman's fingerprints are all over this report. He pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed as hard as he could. But I want to say one other thing. The report also clearly spells out that the October addendum in 2017 issued by Rod Rosenstein to Mueller was specific authorizations to target individuals, namely General Michael Flynn, who was already at that point under investigation for the Kislyak conversation, as well as Jeff. They Manafort, all of Manafort's activities that could not be justified under the original order for Mueller were slipped into an addendum order in October 2017. Not terribly surprising, but still less. Rod Rosenstein is the lowest of the low, a terrible snake in this process, awful, awful person. And I hope that his reputation is ripped to shreds when the whole report is consumed, and perhaps even jointly with the IG reports significantly coming out, which will detail the FISA court manipulation and things like that. Again, I wouldn't look for criminality to be attached here, but I would look for reputation destroying type of undermining of anything that he did, operationally speaking. It's just not good. So the report, the first half of the report, essentially rehashes everything we already knew, that there was no concerted collusion. I mainly read that first half of the report because I wanted to get to the WikiLeaks and try to connect some pieces. Mueller, as we thought he would, tried like hell to get people to link WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, Russia with Trump's campaign. Could not find anybody to do it. Mueller, in complete absence of trying to be helpful and uncovering what really occurred during the 2016 election, Mueller simply takes CrowdStrike's opinion that was accepted by the FBI and other intel agencies that was never inspected, the DNC server. There is zero evidence that the GRU or Russia in any capacity hacked into the DNC database. There is zero evidence, and there's still zero evidence after this Mueller investigation. I've got to think they just kept running into a brick wall and decided not to pursue anything past that point. There's also zero evidence, near zero, considering some redactions that are in here, near zero evidence that Assange will be charged with anything additionally to what is on the table right now, with conspiracy to assist with cracking a passcode to break into or hack into the NSA mainframe with Chelsea Manning. So I think they took a big swing and a miss here. I think that's why you don't have a lot of existing concerns with tacking on extra charges against Assange as you might have had prior to this. So that's a pretty good deal when you couple that with William Barr's statements at the press conference that the WikiLeaks information that was consumed, disseminated, or otherwise applauded by the Trump campaign was in no way indicative of collusion, and it was no way a crime for that to occur. Essentially, he is absolving WikiLeaks as being a warehouse disseminator for that information and not assigning any criminal blame to WikiLeaks being contributors to the hacking thereof. So WikiLeaks, particularly Julian Assange, should take a big, long, deep breath and then re-examine what's going on with the Department of Justice offer of up to 5 years for the one single charge. I think it changes a lot. Certainly, Assange's lawyers are looking at this report and thinking they feel a lot better than what they did yesterday about what might be coming their way by virtue of the Department of Justice. And I think that's why Mike Pompeo, frankly, was in Main Justice yesterday, because I think that William Barr shared that part of the report, and it was probably disappointing to a lot of people in the Department of State and the Department of the CIA and others in the intel IC community, because they honestly wanted something more to happen punitive wise for Julian Assange. I don't think that's going to happen. And again, I've asked Richard Baris to call in and hit the smiley faces if he could. That would be the only smiley face addition that I will be bringing on due to limited time here, and I only have until 2:00. So let's crack open a Polar orange vanilla seltzer water here, always unopened. Richard, if your device down at the bottom, there's 2 smiley faces, you should have them. You just hit that, and then I can do the rest for you. If you don't have the 2 smiley faces, you got to go onto a mobile device or update your Periscope app. Screenshot away, folks. Screenshot away. Whatever you want it for. His smiley face is not showing. Well, then you gotta, I believe, update the Periscope app, and that should work for you, Richard. Provided you're on. Yeah, I don't. Some people, yeah, most people have it. I'm not sure if that's a. I have it. I have it available. Ginger. Hold on. Nope. I guess I hit the. I did it again just in case it didn't show. So I just. So Richard, I just hit it again, which should open it up for you. Sometimes you got to hit it twice when you start a broadcast. I don't know why Periscope makes you do that, but well, we'll see. Very interested to get Richard Baris' take on this, because this is now a political animal. We've moved out of this. We've moved out of this ridiculous element of criminality being attached to anything that the president did, and now we move into the political. He did Leah. He moved out and came back in. So he's gonna hit the 2 smiley faces. Hopefully, I'll have him join me for a little bit, and we can discuss the fact that microphone only. It says, yeah, just click whatever you can, and that's it. Yeah, it'll just be audio only, Richard. You don't have to put your makeup on like Bill Mitchell does or anything. It'll just be audio only, and you. I always feel I always feel like I am dealing with Richard. He's the only one that. He's the only one that's really even less proficient than I am. Yes, I do have to accept it, but you have to hit it first. Richard does not need makeup, you're right. He's too young. He's a young, good-looking. Bad day for Creepy Point Paperboy. Bad day for. There we go. Should be here in a couple seconds. We got you now, Richard. Did everybody hear Richard okay? Give me a 1 on the audio.
1. So I put on makeup for nothing?
All for nothing, man. All for nothing.
On the audio.
So how much of the report did you get through so far?
So I'm moving at a pretty quick pace. I wanted to jump first to where Trump knew, because I was told about some of where to go right away. So the first thing I wanted to look at was when Trump found out about it, and I think you probably suspect why I did that first. But then I think you hit some good points, because the second thing I went after was whether or not Robert Mueller did anything to independently accusations with the hacking and Guccifer 2.0, or did he just rely on CrowdStrike? And that's what he did. He just took CrowdStrike's word for it. So that's another tidbit that, it's not going to make it into the mainstream coverage. But that assessment has at the very least been cast in doubt. So, but again, I think one of the jewels here is that Sessions, I don't know if you got to this, Sessions was under investigation. So with everybody who heard rumors, well, what's going on? Jeff Sessions was a rule of law hero. He was a conservative champion. What happened to him? Well, that's what happened to him, folks. He was under investigation.
And obviously, Chuck Cooper, his attorney, would have advised him as such. And all of the conversations were limited to what you see in the report. You see that the president actually tried to use emissaries to reach out to Sessions because he couldn't even talk to a phone. As predicted, he needed Corey Lewandowski to try to carry a message, which Lewandowski was smart enough not to do. And these are the embarrassing components of the report for the president.
Yeah,
is because a lot of the activities that the president directed, namely telling Don McGahn that he needed to tell Sessions to get rid of special counsel due to conflict. Don McGahn not carrying out that order, which has already been a public. But how did the public find out about that in Washington Post? Chances are Don McGahn was already planting seeds to protect his ass way back then. Who else would have known about it? It's impossible. That would be a one-on-one directive. So I'm kind of confused as to how McGahn can tell people that it wasn't him who leaked it. And secondarily, Lewandowski being directed by the president to take a message to Jeff Sessions to unrecuse himself. Not only did Lewandowski not do that, he met him a month later. The president asked for an update on it, and Lewandowski said he would get on it. And then Lewandowski refused to do it again, went to Rick Dearborn, and Dearborn refused to do it. So it's kind of funny in a way that a lot helped the president from stop being his own worst enemy. But again, the president is not going to be sending out thank you notes to the people that ignored him, even though it turned out to be in his favor. So I think these are just the elements that are embarrassing, because in a court proceeding, we would never have this material out there. You either have the chance to face your accusers in court, as is allowed or mandated under the Constitution, or else it's a political prosecution like this where you just take it up the ass and you can't even respond. And this is clearly a problem, because we just have all this information out there, way too much information, I think, already. It's just going to be political fodder. And we always figured that was what this whole report was going to be about. And I think I want to read one paragraph to you, Richard, and I think it's going to validate everything we ever said about Mueller's mission to make this a political witch hunt that Congress could either pick up or put down. It would be their choosing. The fourth section, the fourth note in the beginning section on obstruction is a single paragraph which sums up what I believe Congress will decide whether or not to pursue. This is the Mueller report. If we had confidence after a thorough investigation of the facts that the president clearly did not commit obstruction of justice, we would so state. Based on the facts and the applicable legal standards, however, we are unable to reach that judgment. The evidence we obtained about the president's actions and intent presents difficult issues that prevent us from conclusively determining that no criminal conduct occurred. Accordingly, while this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate them. Sounds like he's just teeing it up for Congress to me. Somehow I lost Richard right at the point I was finally asking him a question. So we'll try to get Richard back. That was the that paragraph. Let's see if we can do that. Yeah, I think everybody will hear you in one. Yeah, 1 second. You heard my paragraph
I
there?
did. I heard it
Okay.
all. Yeah, what happens? Somebody calls, and they bump you out of scope. But I'm
They
back.
do that. That's
Yeah,
true.
but I
Right.
can still hear everything you're saying. But yeah, so where this goes a little bit further down too is he tries to say, in any event, probing the president's intent in a criminal matter is unquestionably constitutional in at least one context. But then he goes in to discuss bribery and other things that you traditionally high crimes and misdemeanors, right? He
Yeah.
kicked this, and this is what this was my right off the bat take on this. This was always the case. I think that this vindicates people like us, Adam, and embarrasses others who spent the last 2 years filling people's minds with just whole nonsense. They fully expected to get both houses of Congress. And if this report was given to maybe a larger majority in the House and even a slim majority in the Senate, maybe you could push some of those squishy Republicans to give up on protecting a guy they don't like and trying to get a vote another way. Now he kicked it to him. If he thought this was a strong case, yeah, this was. I saw somebody's comment. This absolutely was written by Andrew Weissman, and in fact, the entire obstruction. I couldn't see who wrote that, but they're absolutely right. The entire obstruction theory is the brainchild of Andrew Weissman. But again, getting back to this, he kicked this to Congress because of everything William Barr said at the press conference today. Talking about the president's feelings, Adam, is in a way, I mean, some of the takes I'm hearing in the media are just that nonsense. It goes to the president's state of mind. What was his motive? What was his intent behind making the comments that he did? And so, if Mueller had a case, he would have tried to make it. But he kicked it to Congress because this is a political question. It was never really a legal one. I mean, this is really twisting the statute of obstruction inside out to try to make it say what you want it to say.
Which Congress doesn't give two shits about.
They don't care.
So,
They don't care.
yeah.
Jerry Nadler doesn't care. Right.
I mean, frankly, you're talking about not being able to prove the threshold in a criminal sense, but then you're also publicly bemoaning in the report that the president wouldn't sit for an interview, which clearly keeps the cloud cover over his true intent, and that becomes a political question.
And
And
they wrote in there. Yeah. Go ahead. Finish.
Congress
Sorry.
can pick this thing up. I mean, so to everybody who thinks that this, complete exoneration, as Rudy Giuliani is calling it, is somehow a political win versus a legal win, you've got another thing coming once you hear what Nadler has in store.
Right. And well, to get to that too, I just from judging what you were listening to what you were saying, you got to that section as well where they talk about the president's written responses. And people have been saying, well, it's a perjury trap. It's a perjury trap. I think everything in between the words in this report is a vindication of everything people like us have been saying. Of course, it was a perjury trap. He says that it's unclear from his responses whether they cannot ascertain whether he's being truthful in certain answers because this is the nature of written responses and why we wanted to conduct a face-to-face interview to begin with. That is, of course, it's revealing. It's just like everything else. The true motive here was to try to trick him into talking the way that everybody knows the president talks, and that would have made it a lot easier to put him into a perjury trap. It's a very, very narrow scope to be able to get a president to sit down, to be able to subpoena, which the report says they decided legally wasn't worth it to try to go after him. They waited. It's in there, folks. They wanted it. But they decided that they probably would not. They abandoned Jerry. This report, if you read it, and I really do urge everybody to do it, this report was written by Democrats for Democrats. It's clear. I mean, they teed it up for Jerry Nadler. Here's 10 things, Jerry, you could do. This is 10 different hearings, Jerry. I mean, this is not a legal document.
That's exactly what we said was going to happen all along, and they did. They just did it without mercy and without apology and without compunction. And I think that's why William Barr, having read the report, said, no, I'm not going to let you fuckers get away with this. entire baked-in narrative. I'm going to say what the real final results are, and then allow everybody to read the report. But I think that these just, you're absolutely right. Andrew Weissman, who has been, oh God, rebuked by the Department of Justice multiple times in the past for failing to turn over exculpatory evidence, well known for railroading and threatening witnesses, and clearly listening to Giuliani, what they did to Manafort, he said was counterterrorism style, CIA level interrogation techniques. And I think that that's something that needs to be actually investigated as well. The fact that this was a retroactive, pieced together criminal investigation into Manafort that was only allowed because Rosenstein was cowed by Mueller's office in October, months after having given him his imperative, and he's just going back and seeking to expand it, and Rosenstein allowed him to do that at every turn. It just seems to me the problems with the setup of the infrastructure of the investigation, that it wouldn't have mattered really had they pursued that subpoena. I think that the courts would have questioned the methodologies being applied, and they're so broad that you are asking a president to contend with up to 500 interviews of other people and what they might have recalled being separate from his recollection, including known liars like Andy McCabe and James Comey. So I think they used the language in here that they didn't think that they wouldn't prevail. They just thought that it would take too long. So in the interest of justice and the interest of moving the country forward, they would not seek the subpoena, which is a white horse way of saying that they tried to be the white knight.
Yeah, right,
It's a
right.
lie.
And they were right. And this is I'm reading this and I'm going through it, and I don't know if you've had a chance, or it barely even made headlines, but Representative Collins last week, he released Baker's testimony. And in that testimony, I pulled something out, it jumped right out at me. He said Weissman, before he got to be general, Weissman was running that place terribly, and basically described what is abusive behavior to employees at justice as counsel.
Mm-hmm.
And this is coming, and so we're taking this report in, and I'm thinking, he said morale was in the gutter, that morale over at justice was in the gutter under Andrew Weissman, and that he just is that kind of guy. And the media, they call him the pit bull, they call him this, he really is great. I have to give this to Andrew Weissman. He's great at twisting up a media narrative the way he wants it. He always has been. But this is the kind of man that we're now reading this report and trying to ascertain whether or not, it's not even crimes at this point. We're beyond that. Now we're talking about the political impact. So we're trying to ascertain the political impact of a report written by a man like this. And you'll never hear that on television, but it's just got his fingerprints written all over it. The Supreme Court has rebuked this man. It's very rare the Supreme Court comes back 9-0, folks, and unanimously overturns a
Yep.
high-profile prosecution by the Justice Department. Something the government made they made it a very high-profile crusade, and the Supreme Court reversed him 9-0 on that. And now we're sitting here and we're talking about this report, and he's trying to be the white knight. It's something. It's really, but it's a testament to how much he can twist that media narrative.
Isn't it also interesting that they do no additional investigation into why Massoud came up with this information in the first place to give to Papadopoulos? Isn't it interesting that they note that Carter Page has been under investigation by the federal government for over 10 years prior to the campaign for his work inside Russia and inside, back when he was an American living on the soil again. They don't look into how Carter Page actually ends up on the Trump campaign, and they don't look into why Mifsud did what he did, or why Alexander Downing from Australia did what he did, reporting Papadopoulos' conversation back to, and I haven't even seen Stephen Halper's name. It's just, they blindly ignored every illegitimate aspect of this counterintelligence so-called counterintelligence operation, Crossfire Hurricane. But if you read carefully in the first section, they basically note that they assimilated whatever was operational that Strzok had started, and they assimilated that under the umbrella of the special counsel's investigation without explicitly taking ownership of it, which is you have two separate investigations now, two separate teams of FBI agents working into this retro investigation on something that never occurred. It's just insane that thus far I have not seen any validation for those efforts being undertaken against the Trump campaign. It
Right.
just blows my mind. Not only is Mueller not even a gray hat, I mean, he is, honest to God, was a political hit machine. And if you can work for 10 years with James Comey as your immediate subordinate, and you can hand off the baton of the FBI director to your protege Comey, and you can have a interview literally the day before for the FBI position with the president in the Oval Office, and you can turn around and accept that position as special counsel and claim not to have any conflicts, is blatantly in conflict with the law.
And some of us tried to point that out from the beginning, but we had, large following, large accounts and large personalities with large followings, basically splitting the message. And that is something that I found troubling to begin with. And I tried, I gave up playing Whack-A-Fraud a while ago, but I'm over that now, because now we're at the point now, Adam, where we see the real world impact. And people tell me that all the time. Well, what damage can it do? It's just giving us hope. This and that. Truth is true. I'm a fan of truth, and I'm always a fan of knowing what I'm dealing with, what's in front of me. And when you get to the heart of this report, we have to assume, going back to what you first said, we have to assume that at least one person who was Robert Mueller's number two already knows that. And he, going back to his record of withholding exculpatory evidence, people will find out that at least with Carter Page and Papadopoulos, there was exculpatory evidence before they ever started this counter, or really before they ever went back for to renew that FISA warrant. But they did it anyway. And Robert Mueller, with this report, lived up to his reputation of being a cover-up artist. He doesn't, at least in his post-FBI days, Robert Mueller does not conduct investigations. He conducts cover-up. Whether you're trying to cover up for your players beating on their wives, or you're trying to cover up for your friends abusing FISA, the FISC. This is what he does now. And like you said, it's really stunning. Think about that. He just met with the man and interviewed for a job. And he's got to know, and from everything we've heard, we're talking at least June 2017. He knew he was not going to find anything on the Russia front. So what has he been doing this entire time? What was he doing?
Justifying,
if not China. That's right.
That's it. I mean, it's amazing to think that the Democrats don't see the blind side coming to a Mueller congressional testimony hearing, because I'm telling you, if you think Doug Collins, as ranking member of Judiciary, is just going to let Mueller sit there and wax poetic about the investigations into Trump without saying, how did you ignore this, and this as part of the investigation? Why did you ignore all the elements of this counterintelligence investigation that should have never been started up in the first place? I mean, that's why I think if Mueller does agree to testify, I think he's going to want to do it in a way that he can control the questions that are asked of him, because I think it would be political dynamite to give Republicans a whack at Mueller, because they're not going to want to talk about anything Mueller did or didn't do. They're going to want to talk about what Mueller ignored.
Yeah, that's right. He's going to need a Comey-like kind of sit down where he can control everything that's being thrown at him, and and that's another thing, by the way. Reading this, and then you look at ABC News, their reporting has just been god awful. And but that goes back. This, I know we're jumping to another section in the report, but something else that jumps out is how many times Comey, what a dirty little man, how many times Comey told the president he's not a target, and the president just simply wanted him to go in front of Congress and say, I'm not a target. Tell the American people I'm not a target. And that's where some of this frustration came from. And yet, look at what he did. Finally did get his day in public. He couldn't have obfuscated what was going on more. You really just couldn't have played it any better if you're James Comey. But look, I don't know how you deal with this as a president, somebody who doesn't have political experience. But at the end of all of this, these are seasoned players. And at the end of all of this, he didn't come out that bad. Is it politically damaging? Is this report written to damage him? Of course. But it could have been a lot worse, Adam.
Oh, it's
It could have.
amazing. To me, it's
really
amazing
something
that he exerts roughly 0% executive privilege when previous, I mean, going back to Archibald Cox and the Nixon special counsel all the way through, the Iran-Contra into Clinton and then into the leaks that occurred under Bush at
the Fitzgerald.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. So all this stuff, they exert executive privilege of mountains of protected paperwork and non-testimony and all this other shit. And Trump I want to say, deftly maneuvered, calling it a witch hunt, a disgrace, and a hoax, while at the same time he's just cooperating because he knows that there's nothing there. So Trump is a very litigious guy. You and I both know that. We followed him and his career. He is not one to worry about stonewalling something in the courts forever. I mean, if he successfully doing that with his tax returns, because that'll never be an issue that comes to the light before the 2020 election.
No way.
So he knows how to stonewall. Do it in this particular, which frees him up. Not only is obstruction going to be a hard hill to climb for the congressional Democrats, what the merits of this report, but his openness, his transparency, exerting no executive privileges, millions of documents turned over, every staff member allowed to talk, his own chief counsel allowed to talk for 30 hours. They in a backhanded, weird way, let his own personal attorney break the oath because he's going to be disbarred anyway, and testify before Congress about every deal he might have done over the last 17 years, and they got nothing. I mean, this guy has been opened up more ways than any president I've ever seen. And they've done an autopsy on a living man, and they have not found anything that they can get him with. It's amazing.
And it's just these breaks, maybe they're not even breaks. I don't know, but Cohen runs to prosecutors to try to get himself to buy himself some time, and he did this even recently. We know, and he brought up these tapes. I mean, I don't know how much people have heard about this, but he brings up these tapes. Supposedly the Russians have on him with compromising information. Cohen tried to use this as a bargaining chip, and Mueller and his team, they went to great lengths to track this guy down. And when they finally get to him, he says, those were fakes. Either they're fakes or they don't exist. But it's nothing. It's a nothing, bro. And it goes back to the dossier because Steele actually wrote one of the major reasons for Donald Trump being compromised is that he knew they had these tapes on him. And the guy, Mueller, he chases these people down, and meanwhile, Trump is saying, talk to anybody, which goes a long way toward this obstruction, this idea that he obstructed this investigation, by the way. He tells everybody, and that's so clear in the report, cooperate with these guys, do what they ask you to do, give them what they ask you for, talk to them when they want to talk to you. That's not somebody trying to obstruct an investigation. And you would think, that they did everything they could to ignore some of the stuff that, surrounds the genesis of this investigation, that they would do everything they could to press where maybe it was not relevant to collusion, but they're just trying to get him. And yet every time they tried to track down a lead, it led to nothing. It led to a Russian telling them it's a fake or this or that. It's really something. It reads like a spy novel, this thing.
It does, because this is only compounding investigations that were already underway.
And you see that in there.
The FBI was already investigating. They are already investigating Flynn and his Russian contacts, and they were investigating Flynn on the Farah front with the Turkish contacts. They were investigating whether Sessions lied to Congress in his confirmation hearing. They were obviously investigating Carter Page for years prior to this, and this special counsel was heaped on top of all of this. And it just, you got to wonder if that is the threshold that it takes, if that is the bar that you have to get over. I believe every presidential campaign from now and forevermore till our great republic falls can certainly be breached and surveilled by the Department of Justice.
Well, that's where, look, I really believe, I don't want to get into idealistic, debates, but I really believe in my heart of hearts, had this been Bernie Sanders, if Bernie Sanders defeated Hillary Clinton for the nomination and then went on to beat Donald Trump, and they did this to Bernie Sanders, I would still be arguing, making the same case that I'm making now. Because I don't think people have stopped to really realize. I know there's a lot of lefties out there who hate Donald Trump. They really haven't stopped or, to think about what they have done moving forward. If this is the bar now, like you just said, if this is, then everybody, folks, will be surveilled. And actually, reading into some of this stuff, I got to wonder if, some of this is just not part of the game, Adam. Nothing will ever change if we allow this to move forward. If you have an open, rabid team of, a dozen and a half federal prosecutors coming after you, looking under every single stone they can look under, most of, America is not even going to come out clean out of all of that. This will handicap your ability as the voter who's supposed to be sovereign to impose your will on your government if they can just do this whenever they want. And I got a question. I don't know, intellectual capacity. It's not even honesty. It's just capacity at this point of some of these people who just at all costs wanted to see this man take out this president. And, they're giving no thought to even the next 2, 4, 6 years into the future when your guy gets on there. How's it going to go for him? Will Bernie really be the revolutionary he hopes or wants to be if he can even, get that far? Because look, they went right after Sessions. That to me was stunning. So by the time he's sitting down, calling them his friends, my friends during his confirmation hearing, my friends, you're Jeff, wake up. I mean, these people play hardball. What are you talking about? Your friends?
That was a criminal referral.
That was a criminal referral. That's right. Al Franken. Yeah, that's right. He sent his friend across the aisle sent a criminal referral with his name on it. I mean, I think that some of these, you got some people on the right who want to pretend like this is not the game that's played. And you got some people on the left who just want to see Trump down, and out. And they're not to what this might mean for our future going forward. If this is what they're going to do, if we're going to allow them to do this from now on, then, that fundamentally changes the social contract, Adam. We're not the sovereign anymore. That's it. It's over.
I am just shocked on two fronts. One, I'm shocked that we have these Democrats that are so willingly walking down that road, knowing that this can happen to them, but they're just not stopping. And I'm also shocked that the amount of people that are supposedly, certainly this isn't on mainstream media, but in our social media world, I'm shocked at why these people would continue to push this narrative that this was going to be a good thing in the end for Donald Trump. And I think those are the most dangerous people, because now you have them telling they've been telling these people for a year that this Mueller report was going to be a huge a boon to the investigation of the deep state actors that acted in poor faith. There's none of that here. If anything, it's built in a way to construct a wall, stop them from being looked at or investigated.
It's the complete opposite. Yep. I agree. It's the complete opposite. And, to this, like I said before, usually I try to stay out of this stuff, but it's damaging now. So, I mean, I have to get there. You have to step in and you want to let people make up their own minds. But there comes a point where it's damaging. It doesn't really matter what side you're on. We have people on the right who are just as damaging as the Luis Menches, who were, pushing that, he's been indicted for this. There's an unsealed indictment here. The Krasenstein brothers, this is going to happen. That other guy, the Palmer report, they are just as damaging. So when you have people pushing slow walk theories, and Jeff Sessions is really a white hat hero, and he's quietly working with Robert Mueller. I got to read this. And this is, there's foot language in this, I'm just going to say, but, it came right from his mouth. This is what Donald Trump said the day he found out that Robert Mueller was appointed a special counsel. And he heard it from Jeff Sessions. This is what he said. "Oh my God, this is terrible. This is the end of my presidency. I'm fucked." That's what he wrote. Yeah. And that's what he said. "How could you let this happen, Jeff?" And then he goes in to talk about Eric Holder was the wingman for Barack Obama. Robert Kennedy protected his brother. And he says, "You were supposed to protect me. Everyone tells me if you get one of these independent counsels, it ruins your presidency. It takes years and years, and I won't be able to do anything. This is the worst thing that ever happened to me." Folks, if that doesn't cause you right now to go to Twitter and hit the unfollow button on those accounts, then there comes a point where you can't be helped. I mean, really.
You can't. You absolutely cannot help some of these people. And the same thing goes for General Flynn. Stand-up guy. But this thing lays out, he was screwed, he was bamboozled, but he was also the kind of guy that could not see the train coming for some reason. And,
Shocking, by the way, with his experience. Shocking.
It is, and Priebus lays it out in his account that the president was basically done with Michael Flynn 1 month after his election. By December 2016, the president-elect had concerns because he was now realizing that President Obama had warned him about Flynn shortly after the election, and then he was brought 2 separate issues, one being the ridiculous Logan Act from Sally Q. Yates, but the other being that Priebus and Pence had gone on TV saying that they had not discussed the sanctions at all, and they had. So he was already done with Michael Flynn at this point. And sadly, Hicks added to the story. Hope Hicks said, "The president thought Flynn had bad judgment and was angered by tweets sent by Flynn and his son. She described Flynn as being on thin ice." So all these people on Twitter with their 3 stars and this is Michael Flynn is a hero. He started this whole thing so Donald Trump could ensnare the deep state in a trap. Well, let me tell you how this story really ends, folks. Trump wanted him gone anyway, less than 3 months into his, 2 months into his presidency. And beyond that, Michael Flynn is now broke, bankrupt, still has to testify against people in his old firm just to try to stay out of prison. So here's where we're at, folks. Michael Flynn got bamboozled. He was unfairly treated. He also acted in a foolhardy way of trusting FBI agents who were clearly out to get him. He had to know McCabe's feelings on him, and he still let it happen. That's on him. Certainly, this report has got to be breathtakingly bad news for all the conspiracy peddlers out there who just pushed all those bullshit Twitter threads, Richard, for 2 years now.
Yep.
About how so-and-so is singing like a canary and so-and-so is going to bring it all down. And this is the reality. This is what's really going on. And it's not good to perpetuate this, that everything was done on purpose. President Trump had a plan. You made your point. I've made it 1,000 times. The president came cold out of a business environment, fresh off of a campaign trail for his first campaign that he ever ran. And he walks into a sea of shit, a sea of backstabbing people who just want to get their piece of the pie of a new president. There is no way in hell he can set something up like this that he thought was going to be a positive spin. He just got hammered by bad decision makers all around him. And it's through no particular fault of his own, because he was not being guided by expert political hands. It was a angered and unhappy GOP establishment that wanted their people in power, like Priebus, to oversee what was going on. And they tried to marry that with a wild card like Steve Bannon, who kept bringing in people that couldn't get security clearance. And it just turned into a fucking nightmare. And certainly, those people that say, how could you say, Richard and Adam, that Jeff Sessions was the worst mistake Trump ever made? Trump doesn't make mistakes. Well, you're an idiot. That's the end of my conversation with you. Because if Trump didn't make mistakes, then I guess we wouldn't have little things called Rex Tillerson. We wouldn't have little things
Right.
called Reince Priebus, Sean Spicer. I can go down a list, Amara or Amarosa, whatever the hell her name was. I mean, I'll go down the list of every piss poor goddamn decision that was made in personnel and in the cabinet. I would be here an hour later because we have a decimated DHS. We're getting word now that General Kelly was considered more liberal than Jay Johnson under Obama. Nielsen kept, building up a wall, a recalcitrant wall, and not taking the president's orders. And now she's out of the way. Now we've got an acting DHS secretary who had to be yelled at during staff meetings by then Secretary Johnson under Obama for being openly supportive of Hillary Clinton. That's how bad things are, folks. That's how bad some of these personnel decisions have been along the way. And that is what led directly to this report.
And I think, there's no middle ground where, you give them the dice and you try to explain, look, he came off this thing, like you just said, he came in this thing cold. It's a different world. And you can only, and immediately they take that as it's some kind of an attack. It's not, it's just reality. And a lot of these positions that were filled in the beginning, especially the confirmations, it's not that, Trump did this wrong. Some people you have to make an appointment based on what you know or you think you can get through. It's there's a lack of understanding on how some of these basic things work too, Adam. And that's where these people get in and start taking advantage and getting into the Mike Flynn thing. I mean, there were really people out there saying, convincing people wholeheartedly that this man lost his home. He lost a 30-year career. He was embarrassed and ruined for this crazy, pre-planned, premeditated scheme. I mean, it strains credulity, but you have to there has to be a basic lack of understanding about how government works for some of this stuff to get in, and be able to circulate. And, the only thing I could say about how some of these people get these huge followings is because people want to hear what they want to hear. And sometimes it's hard to hear that the truth isn't always good. It's not always nice. It's not always kind.
Especially with Donald Trump, right?
And that is, look, I have never seen, and I have never seen, I don't know if I'd use the word unstable. That's not really the right word. Bumpy maybe is better. And I guess you would expect that if there's a guy. So, and I always tell people if they support Trump, you should take solace in that. Because if he is really trying to fulfill the promises that he made on the campaign trail to you, then you should not expect this to be smooth. This should be bumpy. This should be rocky. But at the same time, it's all right to admit that the man makes mistakes. I mean, that's cult of personality territory, folks. That's what a lot of people accused Obama supporters of. So sometimes, like I said, the truth, it's not easy. It'll get you Twitter followers a lot quicker. But some of this, for people who've been doing this a long time, you can look at some of these accounts that push this stuff, and you can just immediately, they don't even use the correct terminology sometimes, Adam. No. It's amazing. You're just like, wait a minute. And you'll look at something, that's not how this department even works. Or that's not how, the other day, by the way, a couple weeks ago, when Barr released a 4-page report, there were people saying, well, how could he have read it that quickly? Well, that's not how the Justice Department works, folks. He'd be in consultation. There would be other people helping him. Rod Rosenstein would have had input, and Rod Rosenstein has his own people. I mean, it's just not how, there's a basic lack of understanding, and, I think that's catching up with us. I really do. Yeah, I think people now, that wall's coming down.
They don't understand William Barr and the legacy politics from an attorney general like himself, and how he will handle the press corps and how he will handle his institutional responsibilities. So they didn't see Barr coming. And all of your fanciful dreams about prosecuting political enemies and all this other second special counsel nonsense, You
Scary
don't
stuff.
understand William Barr. I mean, William Barr is there to put this fire out and then rebuild. That's what he's going to do. He will definitely look at what the IG report says. He will work with the White House in conjunction with the IG report to do selective declassification if necessary to create the narrative that this is not a political prosecution, sending Andrew McCabe and Peter Strzok or Lisa Page, whoever, for a criminal referral to the grand jury. It'll be carefully constructed in such a way that it doesn't look like a political prosecution. The last thing he's going to do is get on that horse and ride right away. I mean, you've got to put some daylight between you and this report. I know the president is going to want to move forward on this. Rudy Giuliani's conversations thus far on air have been pointed toward the fact that he wants to investigate the investigators. I'm fine with the narrative floating around on Hannity, but I think it would be a political stunt to try to take the reins of institutional control. If you're William Barr, try to put out this fire and make sense of it with Mueller, and then a week later start referring random FBI agents for criminal prosecution.
Yeah, I would tell people right now to tamp down expectations, especially short-term expectations. And I know what you're talking about because I've already heard some of the stuff from. I didn't see Hannity last night, but people immediately, when somebody like a Hannity takes the air and says something like that, my DMs get filled up. What do you think about this? Is this going to happen? Is that going to happen? Barr is an establishment guy, but I don't even mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a way where he's going to protect the institution. He sees the danger of the loss of trust there, but he's not going to do anything that's going to cause the other side to completely lose trust in it, or at least he'll try not to. He's not going to, get on his horse like a cowboy and start riding and throwing the lasso. That's not going to happen. He within reason is probably a term I think people should start to get familiar with. I mean, he said it even today. That's when the reporter, I think it was Catherine Herridge, is there anything you can tell? Is there anything you can tell? And he immediately said, look, let's stay in the lane. We're in this lane right now. Let's deal with this first. And we'll move, because he's just not going to, like you said, he needs distance. And he's not going to jump right into something and do something further to further hurt the credibility of the institution. I think that he took this job, and this is just coming from what people have said to me, I wasn't that familiar with William Barr. So asking around, William Barr did not want this job, but he did see the damage that had been done to justice. And he took this job because, putting the wrong person in there may have made it worse, whatever it may have been. But he wasn't jumping to take this job, guys. Just to tell everybody now, he wasn't trying to get in there and, there's a new sheriff in town and that's it. Now, I will say that the Mueller investigation wrapped up because there was, to use a lack of a better phrase, a new sheriff in town. He does have a reputation where this was just not going to be able to continue forever. When the cat's away, the mice will play kind of thing. Well, William Barr came back, and that's it. And the mice had to, figure out what they were going to do and go from there. But he's not. I would really tell everybody right now to tamp down your expectations. If there are valid referrals, he'll investigate them. I do believe that. And that, by the way, I believe that for the first time in a long time. So, but I would not expect him to go out there and just go wildly out of control. Listen to the heat he's taking today for doing what 10 years ago would have been considered the professional and correct course of action. He's being slammed. I had actually good for Britt Hume, by the way. I was watching him on Twitter. You got political analysts out there talking about William Barr sounds like he's being president's attorney, or maybe they just didn't find any evidence of a crime. He's already taking this kind of flack, and he's doing it for being pretty much calling the shots right down the center. And I don't see him running out there and trying to do anything that would earn any undeserved criticism. I just don't see it.
I don't see it either. I mean, I was surprised at the lack of redactions in this thing, and I think it's kind of sickening to know that you can spend $50 million and interview 500 people and have 20 FBI agents and 18 lawyers and spend 2 years going through everybody's trash and then put it all on paper for the world to read and Congress to pick up and run with. I think it's disgusting, and I think most of this stuff is just
None of our business.
it reads no different than an anonymous sourced book by Bob Woodward.
Yeah, I agree. It's not
Except it's not
a lot of it.
anonymous, which is unfortunate for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's got footnotes. It's got footnotes, right? It's not anonymous. I mean, a lot of this is just flatly none of our business. It really isn't. And again, this goes back to what Trump, though, was like an open book through this thing. And you would never know that from the media reports. But, he really could have claimed executive privilege on a ton of this stuff. And he didn't. And Barr even said that today, that he would have been well within his right. But, you go through this report, and I can see you reading it now. There's some stuff here we have absolutely no reason to read. But this will be what Democrats try to pick apart, and this will be what where they try to pick up from where Mueller left off. Look, I will say though that public sentiment on the Mueller investigation has always been kind of screwy. People wanted somebody who was fair to take a look at this stuff. Overall, I'm talking about not the Republican base, not the left wing base. I'm talking about overall. People were relatively reasonable with this. And if Trump did something wrong, because remember how the media coverage was, it was to the point where an average person might think to themselves, how could he not have, with what they say every night on prime time? But they were willing to see where this went. And now, though, I think that Nadler, and I can't imagine Pelosi she's smart. This is not a stupid woman. She is politically smart. I'm curious to see where they go from here. It's obvious that they're going to try to pick this thing apart, but there's real danger here because Mueller now has said his piece. The House intelligence community has said their piece. The Senate intelligence, which was supposed to be the serious, in quote, have said their piece. I don't see the political benefit save for keeping their base amped. And I will say, without getting into it too much, Republicans are more enthusiastic right now about 2020. That doesn't shock me at all. Republicans, they weren't going into 2018 until the last minute, but the president's party always, not always, but it's not uncommon for his base, to want to defend their president. So I'm not surprised to see that. I don't know, though, where they're going with this, Adam. They have to know there's a danger here. People don't want to talk about this forever, and they definitely don't want to talk about this over healthcare or over the economy. And I don't know how your case is. William Barr covered this whole thing up, and Donald Trump should never have been in the Oval Office. It's not an aspiring message before something, and that got them through the midterms. But even to the midterm electorate, they were already kind of souring on this thing, and you can see that in the voter analysis. The Republicans got beat because they got beat on healthcare. But now moving into 2020, it's going to be a totally different ballgame. I just don't know. I mean, if I was them and advising them, I would not tell them to hang their hat on this. But I guess they see it as their way to keep their base amped up and juiced up. One crisis and one outrage to the next, and that's how they keep Democrats enthusiastic.
I think you're right. Healthcare will still be a component going into 2020, certainly, but I think Mitch McConnell is making all the political decisions for the president on that. It's not going to happen. They're not going to allow a complete vacuum. They're not going to allow a Fifth Circuit, upholding of Judge O'Connor's decision on Obamacare being unconstitutional to create a vacuum on a policy debate that we're going to lose again because we don't have the answers on healthcare. At least
it's a trap.
We don't have the way to transmit a articulable philosophy or a policy to the people that works in an election. And Mitch McConnell is not unique in taking his senators down the independent road for 2020 either. That is just something that the Senate does to make the president's policies a little more immaterial to the particular states that are vulnerable here. And let's face it, we are vulnerable in a couple states. I don't think Susan Collins needs to be talking about Donald Trump too often. I really don't think Cory Gardner needs to be talking about Donald Trump every day in Colorado. I think these are just common sense types policy decisions that are being made politically by McConnell get upset about it. So it just as a an armchair pundit here on social media, you have to vision as somebody studying public policy is what's more important at this point is to gloss over all the negativity that can be attributed to this report and try to build up this Trump at all costs type of narrative, or do we just break it down and take down all the grifters, the liars, the scammers who have promised something that's not going to happen, so that we don't have to deal with it next year when we're in an election period, when we should be all concerned about making it a binary choice between Trump and socialism, so to speak. So I think once and for all, I'm not going to stop what I'm doing. I know it's a little more uncomfortable for guys like you to do it, but I've seen you do it. I've seen Larry Schweikert. You know Larry better than me. But Larry has really swallowed the shit sandwich. He's eaten the crow pie and admitted that there was a lot of stuff that he wished were true that it just wasn't true behind the scenes.
And you have to credit him for that. It takes, in this day and age, people have a really hard time admitting when they were wrong. I mean, it is an all cost thing. Well, I'll just pivot, to this or that and try to make, my failed prediction or my failed analysis less or more reasonable. Well, I was wrong because of this, or some external force made me wrong, but fundamentally I was not wrong. So when somebody like that comes out and says, hey, I blew this one, that goes a long way with me. It does, because I just see it on a daily basis where people don't. I going into, and that's from economics to politics. But I will start now going forward to show people that this stuff does have consequences. These, from scams, conspiracies on down, this has real political impact. And there are some people and some entities that really present a danger for the right, a danger for Donald Trump. And, they can look what they did. And you saw the polling, so did I. I mean, before 2018, Republicans were fighting against history. They were. But they were really making some momentum, and then there was a series of events that just, they don't go well for a certain side, and the media is going to grab onto it. Look, a MAGA bomber is a perfect example. But there will be a time where they're quiet about certain things now, but there will be a time where they turn around and stick that in your face. And the reason they do it is because it makes your side, it's social desirability bias amplified. And it makes your side look crazy. And no one in the suburbs wants to be associated with the crazy side, right? So whether it's a conscious impact on you or not, it does have an impact. And soon we're going to show people there has been impacts on this. Going back to, and we were talking about this the other day, going back to somebody like a Jimmy Swaggart, the impact that a scandal like the Catholic Church has had over time. These things do have impacts. And scandals, scams, conspiracies, what you name it, whatever we're gonna kind of lump some of these things together, but because they all share certain components, and we'll show that it does matter. So I guess cut the baggage before it's too late is where I'm going with this, because if you don't, it's going to be a problem at the least opportune time.
Yeah, I mean, it's right. All we need, Jerry Wise, to try to speak sense to these people is right here. And if you want to, for people reading along in the second half of the report on obstruction, you can start at page 50 if you really want to get to the meat of it. After Sessions, the president, the closest that the president skirts any obstruction is directly and indirectly to get Sessions not to recuse himself, which I don't think is obstruction, but when he later asked him to unrecuse himself, now he's starting to, skirt the borderline here. And he is really upset. Obviously, we got to go back to the date where all this occurs. This is right after that fantastic joint congressional address. You recall that, Richard? That was his first moment as being seen presidential. I think his numbers. That was late February, if I'm not mistaken, 2017. And next thing you know, within a matter of days, Sessions is recusing himself. And of course, this goes all the way through and talks about the interactions. Don McGahn, as part of his 30 hours of questioning, gives a full blow-by-blow of how all this occurred. Sessions recalls, obviously getting calls from a bunch of people in the Senate and from the White House telling him not to recuse. In the end, he recuses and says he didn't really think it was even a close call. And then he gets another call from the White House saying the president was very upset. Shortly after Sessions announced his recusal, the White House counsel's office directed that Sessions not be contacted about the matter. This is
No
exactly what
comms.
we've been talking about, right? For a
Yep,
long
no
time.
comms.
Internal White House counsel's office notes from March 2nd, 2017 state no contact with Sessions, no comms / concerns about obstruction. And that was how they were directing the president to handle Jeff Sessions. Not only was Sessions not working on some plan to get the deep state, the president could not speak to his own attorney general. The president is quoted in this report as having saying, I don't have a lawyer.
Yeah, there it is. Third paragraph, folks, right there. And again, this should, at this point, if we have to go back and relitigate this, I get it up until this point. I get it. Sometimes you want things to be true, but it's in black and white right here. Don McGahn told them no communication, serious concerns about obstruction, and may have referred to concerns McGahn had about the press team saying crazy things and trying to spin Sessions' recusal in a way that would raise concerns about obstruction. So at this point, not only is there no communication, or not only is there no plan, and there's no 4D chess plan that being matched in secret here, folks. Don McGahn is trying to cut off everything. And by the way, he's doing interest in his own best. And there is a lot of that in this report, by the way. A lot of people around Trump, whereas we could go on and on about mistakes they've made, there are a handful of people here that keep popping up, that keep trying to, sometimes Trump is just his own worst enemy. And they're trying to step in and run interference here and say, hey, no, this is a red flag. This is a red flag. Don't go any further. Do not pass go at this point. Yeah. But that's a guy.
Time again throughout this report, you'll see that Trump very much uses the people in his atmosphere as you would tires on your car. I mean, he just wears the tread on these people by slamming the brakes and hitting the gas so fast that they just try to control what he's doing. And they do succeed in stopping him, but he takes out the frustration on them as well, and they can only take so much. He expends them until there's no tread left on a tire, and they willingly leave, or he asks them to leave. And that just happens time and time and time again in Trump's atmosphere. It's his management style. It's the way he works. And you need to understand that if you're going to understand what Trump's all about. People who think Trump is thinking 4 steps ahead really don't understand Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a very, very impulsive individual, particularly in politics. He has shown no restraint, and politically on the partisan side of the fence, it's working wonderfully. On the policy side of the fence, it's working disastrously. I think we've missed so many opportunities to have legislative wins that we're stuck essentially just looking for regulatory wins at this point and political points on the scoreboard. But I think that people need to understand is Bannon was a problem. He was a leaker. He was an egomaniac. But Bannon is also a guy that stopped the president from making a lot of mistakes. Reince Priebus was an establishment hack. He recommended a lot of shitty people for a lot of posts, and he made a lot of mistakes as chief of staff. But he also stepped in front of a lot of bullets for Donald Trump until he was, discarded. But I'm not arguing with any of these. These are just in the report. These are not Mueller summations. Read the footnotes. They're coming from Bannon. They're coming from Sessions. They're coming from McGahn.
Yeah, it's right there. He didn't make this up. He's not fabricating this. This isn't actually, he's not even inserting takes when it comes to this, the meat of all of this. And again, this is page 50, folks, if you want to look at this, but and before and after it, but we're looking at page 50 right now. This is them. He's not putting in his opinion about what he thought this meant, or this is just recalling what other people said. It's all documented there, and it's not that, again, it's not an attack on the guy. I can understand his frustration, but it is something you have to understand. And when it comes to how this impacts politics, Adam, the impulsiveness about him, a lot of that is red meat to his base. But as a pollster, and this even going back to 2016, go back and look at the trend line on our polling. Hillary Clinton was relatively flat. She had the support that she was going to have. And this is what I always find when I go back and look at this. I always find the most interesting. Even it didn't, WikiLeaks, all of that, a lot of this stuff was just reinforcing what they already believed of her. She barely moved up, 4 points, here or there. It was Trump erratic. His support for Trump was just all over the place. And it would be, he gets on message and he talks about economic nationalism, trade, immigration, the economy, whatever it may be, and he starts to rise. But then, the next day he attacks the gold. I'm not saying the guy's some hero. I'm just saying the father, the cons, or this or that. And people don't want to hear that, and they don't want to hear that hurts. But it does, horse face before 2018. That's another good example. We actually had Republicans closing the gap pretty tight on that. But it's not that, that people make decisions on news cycles, but they don't, because they don't. But things reinforce opinions, folks. And a president, when he gets in there, is supposed to want to expand his base. He's supposed to start to reach out to the middle. And I get that he had this cloud over him. But there's certain, what I'm saying is, don't tell me that Donald Trump's a guy who doesn't make mistakes and, is above typical analysis. I mean, a lot of this, people miss their analysis because they want to miss it. They don't perfect Donald Trump. I'm telling you this because this is what I've observed. I've seen it now with my own eyes. Just to get back to these ideas where these people push this stuff that the guy does no wrong. He is burning these people to the core. It's not just 40. It's not 40 chess. It's more like pushing the envelope. And McGahn, I don't know how long anybody could do that for. To be honest, White House job is already difficult as it is. And when you have, and I think that helps to explain some of Trump's anger and frustration when he first found out about this, because you do know that this is going to be a nightmare going forward. You do know. Even a political novice would know that. You get one of these special counsels, and it's a problem.
Oh, he did note that. I think that's an important point, Richard. As you noted, he said, "I'm fucked." I mean, he seemed to appreciate the gravity of what happened.
Oh, exactly right. He said, how could you? And he felt burned. How could you do this to me? And again, this isn't about whether Donald Trump gets the same treatment as the left. Clearly, that's not the case. I'm not making that point. Now, I'm trying to show you the guy's humanity and how he can make some mistakes. So when we go on there and tell you that there's no, crazy, 4-step ahead plan, the guy's battling for his life. And again, people take it as an attack, but I'm telling you that those wishful thinkers has well been many Jeff Sessions to him. He needed them. You need pressure, public pressure, to fight these things. It's as much a public opinion battle as it is a legal battle. And when, for instance, a great example is when we really did start to have a real conversation about how could Robert Mueller even take this job? And that even goes for Rosenstein, but he didn't get the spotlight as much as Robert Mueller did. His history with James Comey, was he really the best man for the job? If there was any hope to get somebody else or to apply pressure, it was done away with half of Trump's base holding on to some hope that there's some grand plan out there when there never was. So when people say, well, how could it hurt? That's how it could hurt. These are pressure games, folks. They're pressure games. And you have to, when you get the opportunity to apply the pressure and do damage, you have to take it. Democrats are very good at that, by the way. They're very good at that. They're excellent at it. And they speak with one voice. They have the media helping them. And they put it on and they don't lay off until it's done, whatever their goal is. In that case, it was Jeff Sessions recusing himself. Well, now, though, we do know from this report that there was more than just pressure at play there. He had his own investigation to worry about.
Yeah, which, it's funny because I remember actually talking about that. And I remember when I first got the phone call from somebody over at the DOJ that Chuck Cooper was in and around a lot, and that he had become Sessions' personal attorney, I remember saying, okay, well, Sessions not only is recused, Sessions, he's under investigation. I didn't know it was from a pre-existing FBI investigation. But I'll tell you, a lot of pieces are starting to come together. I'm going to let you go in a couple of minutes, but I do want to discuss this with you briefly before we get off. A lot of tried to figure out what was going on in March 2017 and the immediate month and days preceding the Mueller issue being ordered. But it talks about here in March 20th, 2017, Comey was supposed to go before the House Intelligence Committee again, and he sought guidance from the DOJ about how to respond to these questions. And it wasn't Rosenstein, it was Dana Boente, who was the acting attorney general at that time, which went because Rosenstein wasn't even in yet. Remember, he was the last one put through the Senate. So Boente was in charge at that time of the Russia investigation. He's the one who told Comey to confirm the existence of the Russia investigation to the committee. This was a public hearing, mind you. But that Comey should decline to comment on any particular individuals, including the president, were being investigated. And that is what set off the chain of events that got essentially Comey shit-canned. It actually came from Dana. And Rosenstein gets put through the Senate, confirmed, and one of his first tasks as the Deputy Attorney General is to file a memo with Trump to justify firing Comey. It is a fascinating, just like you said, almost like some kind of political spy novel of some sort.
It really is. And there's going to be, I think we're going to hear a little bit more about him in the upcoming days when we even start talking more about FISA. But, it's interesting because one of these decisions that, looking on the outside, it was hard to understand is why they were keeping Rosenstein around. Rosenstein is in a box right now, which is, one of his first jobs was to go in there and look at, Comey's behavior during the Clinton email investigation, which some reports do. And then when Barr stepped in, 2 years later, here comes William Barr to take over for Jeff Sessions after Rod Rosenstein, for at least as it goes with all things Russia and all things FISA, Rod Rosenstein was the man for all that time. And Jeff Sessions, that Huber thing was a joke. That's another thing I want to say right now. That was a way to shut everybody up. We have spoken to people that have given stuff to John Huber, and Huber, he had no idea they had even given it to him months and months later. So he is disengaged. I just want to put that out there right now. But then William Barr comes in, and Barr says, what? Not, you're fired. Get out of here. He says, I need you to stay on and finish this thing through. That was one of the smartest things. I think, it didn't come from Trump. Who knows? But Trump obviously decided a few months before this not to fire him. He had met with Rosenstein at the White House. It was rampant speculation. He is done. I know everybody we spoke to thought he was finished. And for some reason, Trump kept him on. And that was one of the most wisest decisions, I guess, that his administration
that was all
made.
William Barr. I mean, let's be honest here. This isn't Trump's decision. William Barr is using Rosenstein like a human shield.
You are not going to leave right now. Right. You are not going to leave right now and let the dart hit me, buddy. Oh no.
Yeah.
You're going to
That's William Barr to a T. And you can start. William Barr is a way more complicated person to inspect politically than even Donald Trump is. I mean, William Barr is like throwing in a dinosaur into like random, new age times. I mean, you've got to, if you don't understand what the political landscape was in 2000 to 2008, you're really not going to, or even 92 to 96, you're not going to understand how William Barr's mind works. You're not going to be able to predict his behavior. So, I mean, here's where you separate the wheat from the chaff here. And a lot of Twitter pundits are going to fall on their face trying to forecast what William Barr does.
And you got them coming out together today. We saw them coming out together. And when he brought, the collusion thing, that everybody knew what he was going to say there. But, with summary, he did bring up a little bit about Rosenstein, but he got to elaborate today during this press conference. And he said, look, we did this together. We looked at what Robert Mueller wrote, and we both came to the conclusion it wasn't there. So without do you think for a second that would mean as much as it does if it was just William Barr coming to that conclusion alone, or with the new deputy? No, is the answer to that. No, Rod Rosenstein is the man who appointed him to begin with. And for him to have the input in this decision, it carries a lot of weight that you just really couldn't have gotten if you would have fired him like everybody wanted to see happen.
Absolutely. And I bet you there's still some more nuggets here in the last, 180 pages I haven't read here. And I'll do that. I know you will too. And
Oh,
I'll
absolutely.
probably stream later tonight on our YouTube channel. We definitely want to have you on there as a guest soon too. And I appreciate you jumping on with me today. I know it's kind of stuck right in the middle of the report, and there's still some more nuggets in there. But I think, if I'm getting these tweets and I'm seeing, people pushing back, and I think that's the kind of thing that we're doing. You and I will do on our Twitter accounts, and I think just Sebastian Gorka just said finally Q is dead. So I mean, there's gonna be a lot of push.
It's over.
Yeah, it's over. Let's move on. I mean, I think I'll always, past the point of pride of being part of the Trump campaign and winning that election. I think my greatest point of pride will be a direct contribution to killing that stupid anonymous scam and having them take the bait on us and the MAGA coalition being a part of the downfall of a scam that will hopefully save a lot of people a lot of money that they should keep in their pockets instead of sending to these scam artists and these T-shirt jockeys and these MAGA merchandisers. What they should do if they have an extra $5, $10 a month is they should probably check out People's Pundit Daily. You should subscribe to Richard Baris' site, because that's where you're going to get articles that cross the threshold between politics and policy and polling. That's the stuff you need to know. That's where the real stories are. That's the stuff I read if you want to know where I go. I don't go and listen to, no offense intended, but I don't go and listen to Hannity. I don't listen to Dan Bongino screaming into a podcast. I go to certain Twitter accounts and certain investigative reporters, and certainly always make a stop at PPD. So if you're not following Richard Baris, go ahead and do that right now and check out some of his articles, not the least of which the last one I retweeted was a very interesting conversation with Don Smith about perhaps inadvertently picking up some FBI surveillance on Donald Trump in 2015. So check that out. But anyway, thanks, Richard. I'll leave you the parting word.
All right. Thanks for that shout out. Yeah, that story's interesting, folks. Check it out. Donald Trump had an interview with Don Smith, and it's just I'll let it speak for itself. You decide. That's what we do over there. But all the best. Look, folks, keep your wallet tight. You support Donald Trump. Donate to Donald Trump. Don't give to these people. And that's not a campaign thing. I'm just simply saying, watch who you give your money to. It really, from this point going forward, I'm going to be a little bit more vocal about that, because I've been thinking about all of the people have just been scammed out of. If you don't get a product and the product is conspiracy theory, hold your wallet, folks. Hold your wallet. You work too hard for it, And
if you're gonna give it right to Donald Trump's re-elect campaign. Don't mess around.
Yeah, believe me, these people, they don't know anybody. I never run into them when I'm talking to officials, campaign, government, sources. Nobody knows who they are. I mean, it's just a reality. Twitter, the size of your Twitter following count does not matter as to how important you are in this game. It just doesn't. And I've seen too much of this now, and I'm just over it. So I guess if I got to be more vocal about it, I will be.
And I know it's just not a comfortable thing for you. You're not a confrontational guy like I am, and you got a nonprofit. I mean, it's not the greatest thing in the world to headbutt people all the time over this shit. But sometimes the only way to wake people up is through weaponized language and mockery. I mean, that's just
right.
That's the way it works in campaign world. That's the way we won in 2016. So in case you're wondering why we are systematically approaching this in a very campaign-like fashion,
it works.
That's how it's done, folks. Donald Trump taught us how to kill a bad idea, and that's how we're using it. So I'll see you next time, man. I will invite you on shortly, and I appreciate you, brother.
All right, sounds good. All the best.
Yep. Best to the wife, too. Okay, that was Richard Baris, and that leaves me 10 minutes to take a little bit of your questions. Keep in mind, I think Glenn and I will probably be able to stream tonight. I'm hoping we can do that on YouTube. Uh, I'm hoping to get a chance to sit down and just do the whole back half of this report. I've read the first half. I want to read the back half. I'll take some notes, and then I'll be able to answer your questions later tonight in a YouTube stream. It certainly looks like, the good, the bad, the ugly in here. Expect a torrent of William Barr hate that's already happening on all the networks and in the major publications. Expect very little crow eating to occur. I expect the Democrats to seize on these brushes with obstruction that Trump clearly does. Is haranguing and harassing members of his cabinet to kill the Russian narrative because he knows there's nothing to it. So what it is you're trying to establish an obstruction case with no underlying crime, which is a very difficult way to do business. So clearly was a problem for Mueller. That's why they could make no such recommendation. They would have made a recommendation that the Attorney General consider pursuing criminal charges or consider pursuing additional obstruction related investigation into the president if they thought there was a predicate need for that. It never reached that height because they know that Trump knew all along there was no underlying crime, which is explaining all of his tweets, all of his comments on Fox and Friends about a witch hunt and a hoax. And it just it tells you all you need to know about why Trump was so vigilant about getting out his own personal defense on this, because nobody was going to do it for him. And soon you saw that he just squeezed off all of the surrogates because they were not being effective enough in defense of him. Soon you saw he wouldn't even let Sarah Sanders continue with the daily White House briefings because she was not voicing with the extent that he wanted to voice. So upon his own defense, and he really, thank God, let a few of the legal things over to people like Emmett Flood and the Raskins, and it worked for him. It really did. Not sitting down for that interview, of course, was just a no-brainer. I wouldn't call it brilliant. It was a no-brainer not sitting down. It was also a no-brainer for Mueller not to pursue a subpoena because that would have been tied up forever, and he probably would have lost because it's so broad that the only reason Clinton consented to the to the deposition in his case, the Paula Jones case, was because he feared that the subpoena request was that narrow that he would have lost it and it would have set precedent for future presidents. So he bit the bullet and did the deposition. Asking for a blanket sit down with Trump on all issues across the board, constituting 500 witnesses or more and expecting an instant recall is not realistic. So no court was going to uphold or approve that request. So that's why things have worked out the way it did. Read the report for yourself. I know it's basically like reading a book. I mean, we are talking about in excess of 430 pages here. I will read it in its entirety. I'm halfway done. It's just important that you educate yourself. Don't count on me to hit you with every single point of interest. Don't count on anyone to put out a Twitter thread that is going to be entirely accurate. In summation on this, the best thing you could do is educate yourself, read it yourself, and you will learn a lot about who was right and who was wrong. And so far, I'm not seeing a whole lot of wrong in our camp right now in this report. And of course, I'm not going to try to backfill anything I might have been mistaken on, because that's not how we do business here. It's not how we do business in my world. So let me finish reading this thing up after I pick up the girls, and I will do a 6-hour deep dive on this thing, and you'll see us later on YouTube tonight. And we're going to make America smart again. That's what we're going to do. We're going to make America smart again. We're going to make Republican voters smart again. We're going to flood Twitter with the truth. We're going to remove the barnacles that have attached itself to the good ship MAGA and get rid of the liars and the scammers like Brian Cates, Bill Mitchell, Brennan Dilley, Ann Vandersteel, Praying Medic, In the Matrix, Joe M., and the Patriots shitbox. I mean, we're coming after the truth. We're going to shed some bright sunlight where these shitty little mushrooms like to grow in the shade. So that's our job. So please, in order to help me do that and get that out there, please do yourself a favor and grab your favorite chair in the house and with some good sunlight, and grab your iPad or your laptop and read this report. Read this report in its entirety. You will be glad that you did. It's probably the most fascinating political story ever issued, at least post FDR. So, again, I will talk to you later tonight on a live stream through YouTube. What's up? MAGA.